college credit courses.
I have a handout for you about college credit classes, and there's two sides to this sheet of paper. One of them is the public participation in board meetings policy, and Doug gave me a suggestion that he'd like the board to consider, and I did talk with the Walleye Governing Board about that last night. Take a look at the sheet that the back side of the public participation sheet. Did you get one of these last night? And at the top of it, this side of the sheet of paper that has the chart on it has to do with requirements. We're looking at this slide right here, okay? Has to do with the requirements of the Iowa Department of Education. Well, frankly, back it up, the legislature passed requirements saying that students taking college credit classes, dual credit classes and courses in Iowa public schools needed to have scores in reading, math, and science. Did you get that? Reading, math, and science on their ITBS of the 41st national percentile rank. So in the paper that you have in front of you, it says the student must be proficient, and that's a state determination, not ours. Be proficient in reading, math, and science is evidenced by the last administration of the ITBS or ITED, which is the state assessment for Iowa. If a student is not proficient in one or more of those content areas, the local board may establish alternative but equivalent qualifying performance measures to meet the expectation. So what we're suggesting is that if a student takes ITBS, takes ITED, and in reading, math, and science hasn't scored at the 41st, we'd like them to have an option for another way that they can prove that they're competent in those areas so they can take those college credit classes. Now, this standard that's been set out by the legislature really is to make sure that the students that take those courses have the necessary skills to be able to be successful. It's in arts and sciences classes as well as vocational technical classes. So if we read down through that next paragraph, proficient on the ITEDs according to the Iowa Department of Education is defined as scores equivalent to the 41st, you should put national percentile in there. The word national is missing. 41st national percentile or greater. Using that definition along with the mandatory placement assessment chart that comes from Iowa Central Community College, we use it from Iowa Central because that's the affiliated community college that we work with. It's the community college affiliated with our AEA. The following placement chart was developed. Scores on the ACT, the ASVET test, the COMPASS test were determined by cross-referencing with the 41st percentile on the ITED test. And the Stat 9 scores are determined locally. We give the Stat 9 test in the spring of every year, and it happens to be our second assessment other than just the state assessment that's also required by state law. So if you look at those minimum score requirements, if a student didn't score at the 41st in reading on ITED, but they scored at the 16 or got scored a 16 or higher on the ACT test, that would qualify them. They passed the math and the science. They have now passed an equivalent. Okay? And these again are coming from that matrix that comes from Iowa Central Community College. You can look at what those scores would be on the ACT. You can look at the ASVET. ASVET only tests two areas, reading and math. COMPASS tests two areas. Well, that's not quite true, and I'll explain that down below, but they do not have a science test. And so we selected the Stat 9 for the science component because it's a test we already give in our district. Now, students who take these tests, if they're additional to ITED or ITBS, pay for them. So if they cost the district anything, the student pays for the cost. For example, the Stat 9, the test is very inexpensive, but it's the hand scoring of it because it's written response answers to it. It's not a multiple choice test. And so the scoring is 6 1/4, 675. If a student hadn't been able to score at the 41st for whatever reason, okay, we don't know what that reason is, but they didn't score at the 41st NPR on ITED, but needed to have a science test, they could either take the ACT or they could take that Stat 9. And either way, they pay the cost for that. If you walk down through to the below the chart, some classes have different or additional minimum requirements, score requirements as defined below. The The Composition 1 course also has a writing requirement, an 18 on the ACT writing test, a 40 on the ASSAT writing test. So these are writing exams that aren't typically given when we give the ASSAT and the Compass. But to take Composition 1, if you didn't meet those scores, you got to be able to prove it some other way. There is a writing component of the ITED test, and that lists what those cut scores are. For Composition 2, you must have passed Composition 1 with a C or above, and to have had Composition 1, you had to have passed those tests at those levels. Trade class has the following minimum score requirements for math in addition to a C or above in high school algebra 2. So high school algebra 2 is a requirement. You have to have a C or above, and then it lists the 24 in an ACT, and it gives the numbers for those other tests. Trig is first semester, physics is second semester, and for college level physics, you must have passed college trig with a C or better. So those are additional requirements for those upper level English, math, and science courses. You don't have to vote on this tonight. It's the introduction to what it looks like. I gave it to Wall Lakeview Auburn last night. We do need for a determination to be made about what East Sac County says in addition to ITEDs. What are the additional ways that students can score so that they can determine that they're eligible for college credit classes? Do kids score below the 41st and want to take college level credit class? Yes. Do some of those kids that score below there, because this year we have some of them in courses, do they succeed? Yes. Okay. Our feeling is that if a district said the only thing we're going to go by is the DE determination of ITED, we would limit students who have the potential to take those courses. The legislators' legislation was really because they wanted to make sure kids have the necessary skills to be able to meet the requirements. There are a whole host of reasons why kids don't score at the 41st NPR on ITED. One of the reasons may be the skills that they have, but there might be 20 other reasons why they don't score so well either. I would guess, and Kevin, you can tell me if I'm wrong or not, we probably have a segment of kids with a little better effort on ITED tests because they know to be able to take those, they don't want to have to go back 6 times and take the ASVAB test to qualify in reading or math.
Yeah, she's right. If we had taken, when we finished with our ITEDs in November, Jen and I sat down and just kind of charted out the number of kids who, if this had been in place this year, how many kids would have not been able to take a college level class. And there were 18 sophomores for next year that would be able to take them, and 18 juniors would not be able to take them as well, if we'd gone strictly with ITEDs. So then, knowing that, what we did was we talked with Iowa Central, and they sent out a test administrator to go and give the asset test to students this year. And they came out, it's probably been about 3-4 weeks ago, something like that, and administered the test, and that was put out. We had 20 additional kids who were not proficient in either math or reading, who then took the Compass or the asset test to try to get that score up there again. And so Jen and I have been talking to with the Department of Ed, a gentleman named Kevin Fangman, just trying to get more and more guidance on make sure that we do this properly and we do it equitably. And so when we sat down and looked at the other possibilities, the ACT, the asset, the Compass, the Stat 9 test, that was the one that gave us the clearest direction. Instead of making it so subjective, it was more objective. You know, yes, you're in, no, you're not. A student can take, and I know Mrs. Krebs has mentioned that, if they take the asset or the Compass test, they don't score well, they can take it again as many times as they need to. It costs the student $15 a pop to do it. ACT, I don't want to say $70, but I'm not sure if that's the correct amount or not.
And not offered so often.
What's that?
And it's not offered
No,
so
that
often.
is not nearly as, and there's a time span. Once you take it once, you can't just go back tomorrow and take it again. There's a time span between that time we can take